Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Triangle Be Well TV. My name is Howard Jacobson. I am the proprietor of Triangle Be Well, and I would like to give a shout out to my producer, Amnon Nissan, in the studio. How are you, Amnon?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very well. So, like in all those heroes' journeys movies, it starts, Harry Potter has Dumbledore and Luke Skywalker has Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then as part of their growth, the young protagonist has to go out on their own. And the master is still there, either in spirit or far away, but they have to engage their own sense of agency. And that's what's happening today. I am not in the studio where Amnon can cater to my every whim and calm me down and treat me like the high-strung talent. I am sort of iced in today in my home, and so I'm calling in, and I had to get my own water today and everything. So this feels like a real growth experience, Amnon, and
Oh,
I appreciate all you do for me, having to do it for myself now.
that's fine. I'll be more glad to do it next week.
Right on, right on. So we were in the middle. This is the second of a two-part series on behavior change, on just shifting behavior. So before we get there, I'm going to see if sharing my screen is going to work. So that way you can actually see my presentation as I give it. So let's see if that works. And so you should be able to see the trianglebewell.com events page. Just wanted to let you know what's going on.
Yep.
We just had soups on, a cooking class, and coming up in February, the month of Valentine's Day, I've got two different classes on healthy chocolate dreams. One on Saturday in Chapel Hill and one on a Monday in Durham. Also, the defeating hypertension class going on in Durham starts on February 9th, so there's still some time to sign up for that before it fills up. So if you can see that, then you should also be able to see my keynote, and let me know. Amnon, can you see the screen now? It should say Part 2, 3 Change Mindsets.
Yes, sir.
Awesome, because the keynote kind of takes over the entire screen, so I can't see what you see for the time being.
Okay.
So last week we talked about change and the dysfunctional ways that we try to change in this culture, focusing largely on willpower, on no pain, no gain, on heroic action. And we discussed basically for an hour all the ways that don't work, all the ways that we try to change that end up backsliding, that end up having us more frustrated than before, feeling disempowered, confused, and most dangerous, vulnerable to the promises of people who don't have our best interest at heart, who are going to try to sell us the secret, the miracle, the hidden information that everyone knows but us. Because at this point, we've tried so many times, we feel like there's something wrong with us. And it's that feeling, even more than whatever behaviors we're engaging in we want to change, it's that feeling of we're flawed somehow, we're broken, that can be so corrosive. The little voice in your head that says, yeah, you knew you were going to end up back here. You know that this new lifestyle, this new diet, this way of living, this healthy, vibrant way that you see everybody else doing, and you see all the ads and all the before and afters and all the testimonials, everyone can do it but you. And that voice can be such a bully. And so I really want to focus today on research-driven techniques for change that can just eliminate that conversation. Because what happens, it's almost like, as I said, we have had this winter storm here. And we have our driveway is about a 75-yard, 50-yard or so sheet of ice. It snowed, it warmed up a little bit, it froze. And for me to try to get my car onto the road. I'm just sitting there turning the wheels. The front wheel drive is turning and turning and turning. Nothing is happening. I'm just digging myself deeper and deeper into the rut. You can start to smell the burnt tire smell. The gravel from the driveway is getting kicked up all over the place. The engine is overheating. There's fumes coming out. And that's kind of how I think about us trying to change when we don't have the proper techniques and the proper mindset and the proper strategies and the proper tactics. And no matter how hard I try, no matter how many times I push down on that accelerator, no matter how sensitively I steer, because the situation is set up for failure, I will not succeed. So instead, when we try to get the car out of the driveway, we back the car up a little bit and then my wife put down a bunch of pine boughs on the ground, right under the wheel. And then all of a sudden the wheel started turning and it was able to get over that little lip and then start moving. And sometimes that's all it takes, is a little bitty tweak to make everything start moving. So this is the second and third part of the Shift Easy series, how to change your behavior when it's hard to change your behavior. And part two, as you can see, is the 3 change mindsets. And here they are. The first one is positive. The second is patient. The third is playful. So the 3 Ps, hopefully you can remember that. And let's go over each of them in order. Positive. Why is it important to be positive when we're thinking about a change? Well, for one thing, then positive can have 2 different meanings here. One is we want to be upbeat about it. We don't want to be beating ourselves up in negative. And we also want to be focusing on making a positive change as opposed to a negative change. And I'll explain what that means in a little bit. So we want to be moving towards something and not away from something. We want a big why, a meaningful and juicy reason that we're doing this, because your body is going, I like my cheesesteak, or I like my chocolate, or I like my lying in bed and not exercising. That's in your comfort zone. In order to move out of your comfort zone, you're going to have to get, by definition, uncomfortable. There has to be some discomfort. And so if you can balance that temporary discomfort and actually give it context, frame that discomfort in terms of, I am uncomfortable now because of this big, meaningful goal that I'm moving towards. I want to be able to dance at my grandchildren's wedding. I want to be able to travel the world and climb mountains in my 80s. Whatever it is for you, that big, meaningful, juicy why, that reason, can not only make it easier to endure the discomfort, it can actually give nobility and integrity and purpose to the discomfort in a way that makes it even more powerful than it would be if it simply wasn't uncomfortable at all. And it's always useful to have a why that includes others. And here's why. It's not that I just think you should be a terrific person and be selfless. It's that when you do things for other people, you tend to be more committed than when you just do it for yourself. There's a lot of social science research on this, that doing things for other people is more powerful, more motivating, more meaningful than if we just do it for ourselves. For example, there are studies where people are given an amount of money to spend, and they can spend it. Some people are told you have to spend it on yourself. Some people are told you have to spend it on others. And then they're asked after they've spent it to rate how much happiness it brought them. And across the board, people who spend the money on others report that it makes them happier than the people who spend it on themselves. So positive. Why does it have to be positive? Why do we want to be moving towards something? So I want you to picture the word don't. Just what do you see when you see the word don't? My guess is you see the letters D-O-N, an apostrophe, and T. Now, I want you to picture a polka-dotted elephant. Is that different? Now I want you to try not to picture a polka-dotted elephant. So say, as if to say, don't picture a polka-dotted elephant. So which part of that phrase was more powerful, more visually evocative? Was it don't, or a purple polka dotted elephant. This is important because we want our goals to be positive. We want them to be things that we can see. We want them to be things that exist. So when I was in high school, I used to play, it's called frisbee golf then, it's disc golf now. We didn't have all the fancy equipment. We just basically had some cheap frisbee, and we would go on a Saturday afternoon to the big park in downtown Maplewood, and we would make up our own frisbee golf course. So we'd be standing there, 3 or 4 or 5 of us. Each of us had our own frisbee, and someone would point to the big willow tree near the pond and say, okay, that's our hole. And then we'd throw the frisbees, and we'd see how many throws it would take till we hit the tree. And I remember seeing the tree over to the left, and then on the right, a good 40 yards away from it, there was an elderly couple sitting on a park bench. And all I could think about was, don't hit the elderly couple on the park bench. Don't throw the frisbee so the wind catches and hits the elderly couple on the park bench. Don't hit the elderly couple on the park bench. And so I got ready, and I started to wind up, and I threw it, and I let it fly, and it went up in the air, and guess where it headed? Yep, straight for the elderly couple at the park bench, because I was focused on them. Now, you could say I was focused on the don't. I was focused on don't hit the elderly couple on the park bench. I'm aiming for something 40 yards away. I was pretty good. You know, there was no way that was just simply a random accident. That was the power of my subconscious mind focusing on something that I didn't want, but focusing on it because the mind can't picture no, it can't picture don't. So if you are trying to create something in your life and you say, well, what do you want? Well, I want to stop smoking. Well, again, the word stop is like the word don't. It's not something we can picture, but we picture smoking. So saying I'm going to stop smoking puts it in the negative. So instead of that, or I'm going to stop eating garbage food, right? Or I'm going to lose 25 pounds. So those are all negatives. They're all giving up. They're all loss. Instead, you could say, what's the positive behavior you're going to replace it with? I am going to, instead of I'm going to lose 35 pounds, I'm going to weigh 120 pounds. So that's a positive. That's something that exists as opposed to something that will no longer exist. And the idea of this mindset of positive is that we don't want it to be based on fear. We don't want to be running away from something. Because, as I said, the fear-based motivation keeps us focused on what we don't want. And we attract what we run from. You know, if you've ever had a dog and you start chasing the dog runs away from you. If you start running away, the dog chases you. Very, very much the same thing. The second, actually, before I go on to patient, let's say one more thing about positive, which is it's based on the work of Robert Fritz, who wrote a wonderful book called The Path of Least Resistance. And here's another reason that positive is so much better than negative. So imagine if you're trying to move and you conceptualize it as running away from something. So I'm tired of being overweight, sluggish, fatigued, achy. And so you know what to do. I'm going to start eating better. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do all that. I'm going to take walks in the sunshine. I'm going to get a water filter. I'm going to get better sleep. And all of a sudden, you're doing better, right? You're losing weight. You're feeling better. You're more energetic. And what happens? You've moved away from the negative. You're no longer tired, overweight, sluggish, achy. And so now what happens is your motivation can wane because you're not going towards anything. You're just going away from something. You ever run away from something? And as soon as you get far enough away, what do? You stop running. You catch your breath. You bend down at the sides, clutch your ribs, and if you've gotten far enough away from it. So Robert Fritz reminds us that if we're running away from a negative, our motivation will get weaker and weaker the farther we get from the negative. Whereas instead, if you choose a positive goal, I'm going to run a marathon, I'm going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, I'm going to weigh 120 pounds and have 8% body fat and be an Adonis, whatever those things are, the tension between where you are and where you want to go will keep pulling you in that direction, what he calls the path of least resistance, as opposed to the tension between the negative state and where you are now, which the farther you get away from it, the weaker that tension becomes to pull you continually in the direction you want to go. Okay, so that is positive. Now let's talk about patient. Why should we be patient? Why should we not want this change to happen as fast as humanly possible? One reason is we want to tell ourselves this isn't an emergency. I don't care, how much you weigh. I mean, there are emergencies. There are medical emergencies where you need to go under the knife. You need to get a pill right away to stabilize you, to keep you alive. Behavior change is not an emergency. You can go another day. If it's an emergency, then it's time for Western medical care. If it's behavior change, then you still have time. And here's why that's so crucial. An emergency tells your body and your brain that you are under threat. And when you are under threat, your body physiology responds in a certain way, and it goes into basically the limbic brain, the fight or flight response, and it doesn't open up the possibility of the higher brain functions of willpower and self-regulation. Those are higher brain functions that can only happen in environments of peace and safety. And I realize I did not tell you, if you're interested in calling in and talking to me about this topic or asking questions about your own changes that you're trying to achieve, which would be really fun. I haven't given you the numbers yet. So here they are. The phone number to call in is 919-518-9773. Or if you want to Skype in, it would be Computer 2K Voice, Computers 2K Voice on Skype. Again, the number 919-518-9773. So this would be a really good show to call in if you've been thinking about it and you have some habit you want to adopt or some behavior you want to drop. We can talk about that. We can brainstorm it. That's one of the things I do for a living is coach people into improving, upgrading their lifestyles. So back to not being an emergency. Because we tell our body it's not an emergency, we're patient. We're not trying to accomplish it all at once. We're telling our body to relax, calm down, and be able to tap into the higher brain, the neocortex, the intelligent thinking, rational, long-term brain that we need as an ally if we're going to engage in serious behavior change. You may have heard this phrase, progress, not perfection. And I agree with it, and I agree with its opposite, too. But in this case, the idea is that if you are trying to get it perfect, if you're impatient and you just want to be perfect now, then you're setting up an unattainable standard. And maybe one of the reasons we do this is so that we don't have to take responsibility for actually making the change. So if we know that the change we're trying to make it in too big a leap, too fast, too far, too much, without enough support, without enough guidance, without enough of a foundation, then we know we're going to fail. And so our brains can then let us off the hook. And this idea of perfection and impatience is actually an excuse so that we don't have to change at all. So usually I can look over at you and you'll be nodding and letting me know everything's okay. So how are things going at this point?
Everything is fine.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the reassurance. Patience also means that you're not caught up in the results of any one effort. And that means you have a luxury of being able to experiment. So, if I'm cooking a meal and I've never made the dish before and I don't know how it'll turn out, I probably won't invite, somebody I'm really trying to impress. I'll invite some friends and say, hey, I'm having some food, I'm cooking some, I'm trying to try some new stuff. It should be pretty good, but I'm not sure. And you know what? If the food sucks, if the recipe doesn't quite work out or I try some things, we're friends. It's not a high-stakes situation. If, however, I'm inviting somebody over that I really want to impress, I will choose a tried and true recipe, and I will not experiment. I will just go for the safety. So being willing to experiment is a luxury that tells your body, you know what? This is not such a big deal, relax. And therefore, our performance anxiety goes down. And performance anxiety, I did a podcast at plantyourself.com with a psychologist named Henry Weisinger, who wrote a book called Performing Under Pressure. And he shows the research that performance anxiety, caring about how well you perform, in every case degrades performance. That there's the idea that there's a clutch player, someone who does better under pressure when the stakes are high, is a myth. Even the best players in the world do worse under pressure than they do under no pressure. They just have figured out ways to minimize that difference. It's not that they're doing better, it's just everyone else is doing so much worse that you can notice people who don't degrade their performance under pressure. But there's no reason to put ourselves under pressure at all. And being willing to experiment, being willing to try things and say, well, you know what? I'm going to try joining a gym. I'm going to try it for a month and see how it goes. And after a week, you haven't gone once. You say, well, this isn't working. Maybe I could try something else. Maybe I've been trying to go in the morning and I just don't have the energy. So maybe I'll go on the way home from work. And you decide to do that. Maybe you try that. And, you know, it may take a while. Oh dear, the phone is ringing. I didn't even know we had a phone. I guess it's connected to our, well, we'll just ignore it and it will go away. I'll take this opportunity to say that this show is sponsored by drinking water. So we have this home phone that I guess came with our internet, with our AT&T Uverse. I don't know the phone number for our home. I think we have a phone plugged in just because of the snow emergency. That is literally the second call that has ever happened on that phone, which just goes to show. So again, be willing to experiment. That tells your brain that this is not a high-stakes situation. Why is it important to be patient? Because remember we talked last week about motivation junkies, about people who feel like they need to ramp up the motivation in order to make any change. And so in order to be addicted to motivation, you have to see every single moment as do or die. So right now, I'm sitting in the house and there's a bag of corn chips over there. Luckily, it's outside of the range of my earbuds, so I can't go walk over there right now. But if I want to see myself, like I'm really motivated to lose weight, to eat healthy, and so this is the most important moment of all. And I can't screw up. If I screw up, this will be terrible. And so the pressure then becomes constant because every moment is do or die. And when we are less than perfect, which is inevitable since we are human beings, and by definition less than perfect, then we're just setting ourselves up for a shameful episode, an episode in which we are full of shame. We've done something and we are suddenly racked with shame. What's wrong with us? Remember what I talked about at the beginning of this session, this idea of the voice that tells us, you can't do this. This isn't for you. You can't have this. Something's wrong with you. That kind of shame. And as we talked about in terms of addictions last week, shame is part of that vicious cycle. That the more shame we feel, the more we want to numb it out or distract ourselves from it with an addictive behavior. And most of the bad habits we're trying to break fall under that category of addictive behaviors. So that was positive, that was patient, and now we are at the third P, playful. So imagine you have take this attitude toward your change. You are curious. Gee, I wonder, I have all this chocolate in the house, but I put it all on the top shelf. I wonder if that will stop me from eating it. Oh, look, a step ladder. Oh, look, a chair. Oh, look, I've eaten the chocolate. I guess that didn't work. As opposed to, oh my God, I can't believe I did that again. I put it away and I thought it was going to work and I'm so worthless and I'm so weak. Right? One is judgmental, the other is curious. I wonder if this is the thing that's going to work. Gentle. Play is gentle. And I'm not talking about, Super Bowl 50 where people are going to try to bash each other's brains in. When you start playing for the score and for ego and for money and prizes and status, that's no longer play. That's just a job. They're just doing a job. Don't confuse professional sports or even college level sports with play. Play is curious, it's gentle, and play seeks to be its own reward. You're not doing it to win. You're not doing it to end the game. The best games that we play without agenda of victory. It's just playing catch, playing the game, not keeping score, going deep late into the night, and just enjoying the experience. And so behavior change can have that same quality of playfulness about it. We are gentle with ourselves. If you mess up a free throw in the NBA and your team loses the championship, you probably beat yourself up. But if you're playing with a bunch of friends, you're not really keeping score, and you take a shot and you miss, it's like, oops, you know what? I'm human. That happens. Maybe I'll try to figure out what I did and fix it next time. It's a completely different attitude, and one much more conducive to success in changing behavior. Because when you're beating yourself up, you're not learning. When you're gentle, you're like, I wonder, again, you combine it with curiosity. I wonder how I could do this differently. I wonder if I'm closing the wrong eye. I wonder if I'm bending my knees enough. And with curiosity, gentleness, and wonder, you're able to then go back and experiment and try new things and keep that patient, playful, positive attitude. Again, playful is another word for experimental. If you know any really, really good scientists, like amazing scientists, they have one thing in common. They are all playful. They're all doing thought experiments. They are all really curious. And so, a definition of a great scientist is someone who invites the world to play and say, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens if we feed people this diet. Let's see what happens if we combine these two molecules. Let's see what happens if we invite people to engage in this behavior in this way with these constraints and those parameters. The best scientists in the world are playful. And you want to be a scientist of your own behavior, because if you're being a scientist, then you will figure it out. With some basic guidance and basic rules, you will unlock the key of your own behavior change. But if you're just going to be judge, jury, the screaming football coach yelling at you, then you're not going to be able to find those pathways to behavior change. Again, why playful? Because motivation junkies are too serious and uptight. And relaxing and just taking it easy feels too scary. It feels like if I relax, I'm holding everything together. I'm holding it all together tightly. If I relax, everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket. It's an illusion, right? Like my own mental tension keeps the world from falling apart. And if I relax, then I don't know what will happen. I don't know what I'll encounter when I put my eye back on the ball again. And the truth is, none of us is that important. None of us is indispensable. And relaxing is one of the best ways to engage in a changed behavior. People are scared that if they relax and are playful, that they will never get the intensity back. It's a lack of trust. It's the idea that the behavior that I want does not have a home in me. The behavior that I want to eat better, I want to exercise more, is going to be some foreign object that I'm going to have to insert and maintain, that it will never be the default. It will never be the norm. It will never be natural. And if you think back on your life and you think about not the bad habits, but you think about all the good habits you have, you probably brush your teeth, you probably put on clothes in the morning before you go out. You have lots and lots of good habits. And all of those come from being relaxed about them. I bet you don't freak out about getting dressed. You just put your clothes on and you go out. And you don't ever make mistakes and wear underwear on your head or forget one pant leg. Right? Being relaxed is the prerequisite for mastery. So assume you recognize this fella. He's back in the news with his new movie. Or I guess he's dead, right? He wasn't in the new movie. But, certainly a large shadow. So this is Yoda. And one of his most famous sayings is when Luke says something like, I'll try. I think he might be trying to pull the spaceship out of the swamp. I'm trying, I'm trying. He says, do or not do, there is no try. And with respect, Yoda, that is terrible advice to someone who's trying to change behavior. So here's an example of a poorly phrased resolution for behavior change. I'm going to give up meat. So before I go into it, take a second and see what do you think are the issues? What are the problems and how might you phrase it differently? So the first one is it's negative. It's not positive. I'm going to give up meat. I'm going to take something that exists and I'm going to eliminate it. I'm going to take something that I have and I'm going to lose it. So immediately, there's no replacement. There's no positive. It doesn't say what you're going to eat. Instead, you're just giving up meat. Secondly, it is permanent. I'm going to give this up. I'm never going to do it again. And third, it is categorical. It's 100%. There's no wiggle room. There's no going back. So it's a very, very sort of bold, negative, forever type of statement. And that's the kind that Yoda might tell you to do, right? Do or not do. There is no try. You're just going to give up meat. You're not going to try anything. The trouble is that when our subconscious hears something like that, it immediately begins looking for the escape clause. If you don't give it an escape clause, it's going to create one. So again, it's negative, all or nothing, and permanent, and very high stakes. Right? The person who says that, they might be doing it for ethical reasons, they might be doing it for health reasons, whatever it is, it's high stakes. How about this instead? Why don't you just try a couple of meals? Try a couple of meals, and you can call them meatless, although it's still negative, or you can say meals consisting solely of plant foods. So now all of a sudden it's not absolute, it's temporary, it's just a couple, and it's uncommitted. So why might that be better? Because it's low stakes. That's who doesn't think they could do that? So if you have tried the 100% route, now if the 100% route works for you, then go for it. I'm not saying take more time than you need or put in more effort than is required or make it more complicated than it has to be. Instead, I'm saying if that doesn't work, then you can try a more incremental approach. All right, I'm going to try a couple of meals. I'm going to do meatless Mondays. I'm going to try just on Friday nights to make a meal that's completely plant-based. And what happens at that point is you probably succeed. And that success will then give you confidence for the next one. So instead of saying, well, okay, that succeeded, then I'll just go back to the way things were. And you're like, yeah, I did two meals. Maybe I'll do 4. Maybe I'll do a whole week. Maybe I'll do meatless Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And you start thinking about what are the next steps? What are the next levels that I could achieve here? All right, so be a scientist. We talked a little bit about this around experimental and playful, but I'm going to go a little bit farther here and say behavior change is a complex topic. There are many, many, many social scientists who have devoted their life to understanding how humans behave, how we change behavior, how we form habits, break habits, set up new habits. And there's a lot of good advice, but ultimately, we're not talking about other people. We're not talking about everyone. We're not talking about cohorts. We're not talking about the human race as a whole. We're talking about you. And you are, as they say in science, a sample size of 1. You are the whole universe of your study. So you might as well study yourself and start to learn things about yourself. What is your motivation? What works well? When have you made behavior change effortlessly and easily in the past? When have you tried to make a change that was hard, that didn't work? What ended up working? So really get to understand yourself, who you are, what works for you. And now try these little experiments. Like I said, putting the chocolate on the top shelf, going to the gym on the way home, maybe pack your gym bag in your car. Little things, and see what starts moving you in good directions and what starts moving you in negative directions or doesn't end up working. And you're not doing it out of a sense of commitment to anything. You're just being curious about, will this work? Will that work? What if I devote $100 a week to getting lunches at this restaurant that has really good plant-based options. $100, 5 days a week. If I could spend $20 and get a lunch and dinner, and that way, if I just have oatmeal for breakfast, I've got all my meals covered for $100 a week. Could I try that for 3 weeks and see if that works? And then maybe could I substitute, maybe save a little money and make my own meal on Wednesday nights? And again, it's just these little tiny experiments that you're curious. I wonder if this will work. So why is try so powerful? Yoda doesn't want you to try, but why is it so powerful? So a while back, 3 years ago, I think, I was working with a company called Wholevana, which was started by Nelson Campbell, one of my co-author T. Colin Campbell's sons. And they were doing, and this is, by the way, documented in the movie that came out this year, Plant Pure Nation. But I was involved, and we were working on these jump starts in these little rural towns in the Piedmont area of North Carolina, in the Triangle. And one of them was fewer than 100 people in the trial, and it was in a small town in North Carolina. And they were asked to try eating plant-based for 10 days. 10 days of whole food plant-based diet. Now, it was easier for them than it might be for most of us in that the program fed them. Like, this was the pilot program. So, it's called the Jump Start. You take care of your breakfast. We're going to feed you ample lunches and dinners. And the lunches and dinners were huge. They were like, more than a pound of food for each meal. People were saying they every time they picked up their food that they had more and more leftovers in the refrigerator. So nobody was going hungry here. And again, all the meals were provided, lunches and dinners, and there was plenty left over for snacks, and people did their own breakfasts. And we did biometrics before and after. We took weight, blood pressure, and lipid profile. And the average cholesterol dropped 25%. People lost an average of 5 pounds in 10 days, and they felt better. And we didn't ask them to change their behavior forever. We didn't ask them to change their diet forever. We just asked them to try something for 10 days. And people, when you go watch the movie, go watch Plant Pure Nation, and you'll see people crying when they see for the first time in their life that their numbers are getting better. And it happened after only 10 days of eating delicious food. So here was one of the questions we asked in a follow-up survey. Since your Jump Start, how often do you eat whole food plant-based meals? And we gave them the options: never, rarely, sometimes, always. Why do I have never twice? That's crazy. I never noticed that before. Anyway, there was 4 options: never, rarely, sometimes, and always. And again, this was 10 days of giving people food. So think about it. Short period of time. We didn't really teach them a lot of skills. We didn't teach them how to make their own food. We just gave them the food. So you'd think that the percentage of people who continue this way would be pretty low. And by the way, this questionnaire was sent out several weeks after the end of the Jump Start. So here are the responses. That's what it is. It was sometimes, often, and always. Forget that, but never at the bottom. So the top 3, always, almost 17% said that I've changed. I've completely changed the way I eat. 17%. Almost 40% said often, most of the time, I eat this way. Yeah, I go out sometimes, or sometimes we still like one of the old dishes, or the chicken or the meat or the fish or something. But basically, more often than not, 40% of them are eating whole food plant-based meals. And sometimes, so I don't know exactly what that is, maybe once or twice a week, another 44%. Nobody put down rarely or never. So for 10 days for try, significantly changed people's diets for the foreseeable future. That's really powerful. And that's the power of try, as opposed to insisting that people go 100% from day one. So that was part 2, the 3 shift mindsets. So let's recall what they were. Number 1 was patient. Number 2 was positive. Or was it the other way around? And number 3 is playful. And you can see that this jumpstart was very playful. People were given the food, it was delicious, and they were invited to see, you know what, does this make a big enough change in your life that you would be willing to keep doing it? And everybody said to some extent, yes. Now let's get to the 3 shift strategies. And before we do, Amnon, are there any questions or comments from our audience?
Nope.
All right, then I will plow ahead. I will continue on my way.
So
The
keep
3
plowing.
shifts. I'll keep plowing, and maybe by the time I'm done, I'll be able to drive out of my driveway. So strategy number 1, shrink the shift. Shrink the change you're trying to make. Number 2, tweak the backdrop, B. And C, pre-worry and post-mortem. And those 3 phrases shouldn't mean much yet, so let's jump in and explain them. Shrink the shift. So here is a photograph of a notebook. It was a journal that was given to me many, many years ago for writing down all my private, most personal thoughts. And the day I got it, which was sometime in the last millennium, it was in 1999, I wrote like 2 pages the very first day, because I always put a date above any entry. And then I wrote the next day, and then I wrote a couple days after that, and I wrote a week after that, and then I didn't write in it again for about 5 years. Didn't get into the habit. Then and 5 years later, I started using it as kind of a notebook to take to conferences, and I have a few pages in there, and then I stopped again. And then I always wanted to journal. Like I kept on hearing, like journaling is a really good thing. It will help you get clarity. It will help you achieve your goals. It'll help you be peaceful and understand yourself and grow and develop, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to get back into journaling, but every time I would sit down, I'd say, I can't. I can't commit to this. It's too much. I can't commit to writing 45 minutes in the morning or half an hour or doing my morning pages or whatever technique that I thought I was going to do. So after I discovered this idea of shrink the shift, I decided to set up a new rule. And the rule was, every day I get up and after I meditate, I write 1 sentence in my journal. And that 1 sentence could be, I'm tired today, period. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. It could be, I have nothing to write today, period. It could be anything as long as it fit the definition of a sentence. So what happened was, now after I finished meditating, I would open the journal because I knew I could write a sentence. I knew I wasn't going to have to sit there for half an hour, so I would write a sentence. And every single time, I wrote a sentence, and then I wrote a second sentence, and a third sentence, and I would end up writing at least 2 or 3 paragraphs. I ended up doing the journaling because I made the threshold for success so low. All I had to do was write a sentence, and I could even write the same sentence as I wrote the day before. And once I did that, once I was in there, the problem I discovered wasn't the writing for half an hour, it was starting to write for half an hour. And once I was in it and doing it, then I remembered why I wanted to journal in the first place. Because I wanted to get these thoughts down. I wanted to consider them. I wanted to wrestle with some areas of confusion. And that became its own reward very, very quickly. So we talked about B.J. Fogg last week and his behavioral model. We talked about the B equals MAT, the behavior equals motivation times ability times a trigger. So the second part of that goes along with that model is that if you want to change your behavior, if you want to adopt a new behavior, adopt a new habit, make the new habit as small as possible, which is to say, reduce the amount of ability you need. Make it as easy as possible. The tiny habits makes it easy. So here's the formula. After X, after something already occurs, either something in the environment after the clock strikes 3, or after I wake up, or after I brush my teeth, or after my spouse pours the coffee, some existing trigger, the smallest behavior you can think of that moves you in the direction of your goal. So not, after I wake up, I'm going to run 10 miles, but it might simply be after I wake up, I am going to do a push-up, or I'm going to do a squat, or I'm going to put on my running shoes. And after you do it, you congratulate yourself. You can like high-five yourself. You can say, yes. You can say, you rock to yourself. Something that builds a little bit of a positive neural pathway, which will speed up the adoption of the habit. So when we learn habits, the bigger the response, the bigger the reward or punishment for the behavior, the faster it becomes a habit. So, we touch the hot stove, the stimulus is so great, the punishment is so great, we could form a habit right away. A lot of phobias are caused because someone has a really bad experience one time, and then they have learned to avoid that thing forever. So we can speed the development of a habit by greasing those neural pathways that self-congratulate, that make us feel good, that make us feel rewarded. And the last part is just keep track of it. Put it in a spreadsheet, put it on a piece of paper, mark an X in your calendar, use an app, and just make it as simple and small and easy as possible, and be proud. It's not like, well, I did one push-up, but really in my head I should be doing 30. It's like, I did one push-up. And if you feel like doing more, do more. And if you don't, you don't, but there's no obligation. And the most important step is adjust as necessary, because it might not work the first time. You might say, okay, after I brush my teeth, I'm going to do a push-up. And then you realize, well, I'm brushing my teeth in the bathroom, and there's no room to do a push-up in the bathroom, or I don't want to go down on the bathroom floor and smell underneath the toilet. So maybe I need to change it. Maybe instead of a push-up in the bathroom, I'm going to do a squat right after I brush my teeth. Or maybe right after I put the toothpaste on my toothbrush. Before I brush my teeth, I'm going to do a squat. Or maybe I take the exercise out of the bathroom, and I put it, as soon as I put on my underwear, I'm going to do a leg raise. And you adjust to figure out, where does this habit fit in your day? Where does it fit in the existing string of behaviors? If you can't find a place for it, it's not going to happen. There were years where I wanted to meditate, but I really didn't have a place for it. I didn't make a place for it. I didn't consciously think about it. And so it didn't happen because it was just sort of floating there in my consciousness, but didn't have a place or a time in my schedule. So here's an example that BJ gives in his public talks. If you've ever seen him on YouTube, you will have seen this example probably. It talks about flossing. So here's how the formula works. After I brush my teeth, I floss one tooth. Then I give myself a high five. And I see how many days in a row I can do this. And this is flossing is a really good example because it's really easy to floss. Everyone knows they should floss, but people don't because it's not that easy. It takes a lot of time. If you haven't done it for a while, your gums will be sensitive. They might bleed. You feel like you don't exactly know what you're doing, but everyone can floss one tooth. So what I'm setting is a very low bar. It will be very easy to do. After I brush my teeth, I floss one tooth, give myself a high five, and after a while, it becomes a habit. Now that I'm brushing my teeth, I'm anticipating the next thing. I'm anticipating getting out the floss and flossing one tooth. And by the way, I never did floss just one tooth. That was my intention, but like once it's there, I might as well just do the next one and the next one, and pretty soon I've done the whole mouth. And now the habit is very ingrained. After I brush my teeth, I have to floss. I just don't feel good if I don't floss after brushing. And it became a habit quite easily because I set the barrier to entry so low. And if I keep forgetting, and at first when I did this, I would forget a lot. Then I tweak the backdrop, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and try again. But here's so we'll talk about tweaking the backdrop quite soon. But again, this is a positive habit. It's not, I'm going to stop doing something. Tiny Habits works with things you want to start doing, not things you want to stop doing. So if there is something you want to stop doing, then you have to figure out an incompatible habit to replace it with. So instead of eat less meat or stop eating meat, it becomes eat plants or eat more plants. So why is it useful to shrink the habit? For one thing, it undermines that addiction because we are being aware of what we're doing and we're approaching it scientifically and like a game. And addiction is the opposite of awareness. Addiction exists to blunt our awareness of unpleasantness. And this kind of shrinking the habit creates a sort of a meta scenario where we're looking at ourselves, we're observing ourselves not critically in a negative sense, but critically in a curious sense and seeing what's actually going on. You empower your existing backdrop to promote the desired behavior. Remember the three problems with changing behavior. It was addiction, backdrop, and confusion. And so all of a sudden, instead of having the backdrop work against us, instead of having our environment fight us, we're now going to use our environment to remind us to do the good thing. And finally, we eliminate confusion because all of a sudden we've created an obvious, simple, positive step. So if I say, all right, I want to get in shape, I'm going to do the P90X or I'm going to do the DW40 or whatever workout it is, there's tension, there's confusion, I don't know what to do. But if I say, I'm going to do one push-up, well, how easy is that? I'm going to floss one tooth. It removes all the ambiguity and replaces it with delicious clarity. So we're undermining addiction, empowering our backdrop, and eliminating confusion. BJ says this. He says, tiny habits grow to their proper size when planted in the right place. And he says this in response to people who say, yeah, but what's the point of flossing one tooth? What's the point of doing one push-up? He says, you know what? You're going to do one push-up, and once you establish the seed, think of that tiny habit as a seed. Once you establish it in the proper soil and you give it the proper nutrients, it will grow to the right size. The carrot will grow to be a carrot. The carob tree will grow to be a carob tree. And your push-ups, your morning push-ups or evening push-ups, will grow to be the size they need to be. But you can't grow them unless you set up the habit first. Shrinking is confidence boosting. It gives you a small win. It gives you a feeling of, yes, I can do this. Remember that voice that says, this is not for you. You never can change. All of a sudden, you've given it a in-your-face counterexample. I did change. I have changed something. And that confidence then becomes available for any other change you're going to make. In 1977, Albert Bandura, a sociologist, social scientist, wrote a paper called Self-Efficacy, basically meaning if you think you can do it. And he said that any behavior that you're trying to achieve or change, the number one predictor of whether you were going to do it was whether you believed you were going to do it. That if you think, yes, I can do this, and you truly believe it, 100%, no doubt, then you'll do it, unless it's completely impossible. And even then, maybe you'll do it. But if you have doubts, if you're like, I'm not sure, I don't know if this is for me, it might seem too hard, then you're going to interpret every setback as an explanation for why you can't do it, and you're going to interpret every excuse as a reason. So someone once said, you can either have what you want or your reasons why not. Shrinking the change, creating tiny habits will boost your confidence and will give you that key element of self-efficacy as you move forward onto the next change, the next habit that you're going to grow. It's also capability enhancing. If you can now do one push-up, well, if you can do one technically correctly, then there's no reason you can't do 2 or 10 or 15 or 100, except practice. So it's no longer a barrier. You now have increased your capability to do a thing. If you've never flossed, you floss one tooth, and you're like, well, yeah, I can floss. I may choose not to, but I can. And it also creates positive momentum, which reinforces the shift. So all of a sudden, after years and years of struggle or stagnation or going in the wrong direction, you're now going in the right direction, and that builds on itself. And again, if we're thinking about that graph, when you enhance your ability, you move over, you make it easier, then you need less and less motivation. So now I don't need any motivation to floss my teeth. I need a lot of motivation to do long runs still, but I don't need a lot of motivation to do a push-up. So remember, here's that line. If we're making something that was hard easy, then the motivation that's required to activate that behavior above the action line gets much smaller. And tiny habits will grow, as BJ said, and tiny food habits will grow as well. So one meatless meal per week can turn into one meatless day per week. So it's a meatless Mondays. It can turn into another thing, like I'm going to soak the oats in the refrigerator after cleaning the kitchen after dinner. So now I can have oatmeal for breakfast tomorrow morning without having to worry about cooking it. Now I'm going to get another habit. So a little bit harder. I'm going to cook beans and grains in bulk. I'm going to cook black beans and brown rice in bulk on Saturday afternoon so I can have it for the whole afternoon, for the whole week. Now I'm going to do something even more amazing. When I chop vegetables for food, I'm going to save the clippings. I'm going to have a Ziploc bag, and I'm going to throw in the carrot peels and the onion skins and the garlic and the celery root, the bulby bits that we don't eat, and the leaves. And I'm going to make soup stock once a week. I'm going to take that bag and I'm going to boil it up, and I'm going to make my own delicious soup stock out of essentially free ingredients that I otherwise would have thrown out or composted. And you can see each one of these is incrementally harder than the one below it, but when you get to it, it all feels equally easy because you've built up your confidence, you've built up your capability, you've built up positive momentum. And it ends up turning into big shifts. The one we're talking about in particular here is eating a whole food plant-based diet, having all of the chops, all of the habits, all of the skills, having the pantry, having the environment, the backdrop, eliminating the confusion, and it's through those little shifts, those shrunken shifts, that we end up achieving the big goals. Amnon, how are we doing for time? I think we're about an hour in. Should we?
We have another 3 minutes.
Okay, so why don't we stop here for today? I can't believe how long I can talk about this stuff. So we're going to do B and C next week. So this is now officially a 3-part series on changing behavior. Anyone's got a quick question, you can call it in at 919-518-9773 or Skype computers 2K voice. Let me see if I can bring back my what do you call it here? My
Yourself.
own face. Myself. That's right. To say goodbye with stop sharing screen. Let's see.
There you are.
There I am. Okay. So. This just to let you know, there's in February, there's a whole bunch of healthy events. There's 2 around chocolate. So if you go to trianglebewell.com/events, or just click the events link at Triangle Be Well, you'll see there is the 2 events on chocolate. Click on either of those. You can sign up. It's pretty cheap. It's like $10 for members, $15 for non-members. If you want to become a member, you can click the join button, or you can just attend the event, join at the door, and I'll refund the difference of your ticket if you become a member at that event. Healthy chocolate dreams are some of my favorite desserts. Pretty much all of my favorite desserts involve chocolate. So Amnon and I have bonded over chocolate. We haven't even shared it together. We just bond over the idea of chocolate. So these are whole food recipes. They are chocolate based. They will range from maybe a creamy pie to cookies to bakes to maybe a shake. So different ways to get chocolate into your life in a delicious and healthy way. And I've decided to do that one twice because I know it's going to be popular, but also because I like doing it and I wanted to do it twice. So that's on the calendar. If you have hypertension and you'd like to find out about how to defeat hypertension naturally through lifestyle and understand the medical background and what the drugs do and why they're not a good idea if you can get off of them, why they're not a good idea long term most of the time, you can go to the website, trianglebewell.com, click on events, and schedule and check out that schedule and sign up from there. As always, Amnon, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for talking me through this remote connection and holding my hand and helping me get this my home studio set up, so it looks pretty good.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for listening. If you have comments or questions, I think you can post them after the show. You can post them if you go to Nissan Communications YouTube channel. The videos are up very, very quickly, and you can go there and post your questions and comments, and I will answer as many as I can. And we'll be back next week to hopefully, probably conclude our series on habits and habit formation. And with that, as always, be well, my friends.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Help Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.